As I say, we work equally amount, paid hours and parenting hours. So there's not really any, so that's why it's sort of quite interesting that we've spotted this kind of trend.
Well, between you've got 4 hands, so hopefully you can keep the kids safe.
There you go.
That's the solution. Thank you very much, Tom. Tom in High Wycombe. Ruth is called from Lincoln. Hello, Ruth.
Hi, I couldn't agree more with Tom. Even though I'm not a parent, I never want to be a parent. In fact, I got sterilised at 26.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how much I didn't want to. So that in itself was an ordeal with some of the interesting sexism, shall we say, involved in that. But my ex-husband, not for anything to do with children, he's equally child-free, has very rarely been asked about children. The moment we got married, the question started for me. Not him, me. And to the point that I was going for massage once, and I once had the lady ask me, would you have me if I had children? I said, no, I'm not having any. And she said, your husband will leave you there, won't he? And I said, sorry what? And she said, no, oh, yeah, but your husband will want them. I said, my husband doesn't want children. If he did, I wouldn't have married him.
Also, the idea that you wouldn't have mentioned that to your husband at any point.
I know, it was ridiculous.
Yeah. How did that conversation end?
I walked out.
Yeah, I wouldn't have.
It was before the time. I just said, okay, thank you, but no. And just walked out. I was in complete shock. But I've had loads of comments. I had them growing up because I'm an adopted child. I had them, what about your real mum? My parents who brought me up are my real parents.
Real is such a loaded word, isn't it? It's like your life is pretend. Yeah.
I hate that term. And then I get it still now. Oh, you're divorced. Oh, well, you must get on and have a partner so you can have a...
It's time to head back for a cover. Right, Chico?
For extra help managing your household budget, search for the smart meter today. Consumer action required. Eligibility may vary.
Maybe you're in the business of sending laptop power cables to Leeds, mustard to Dijon, or knitwear to New Jersey. Christmas is a time when you're at your busiest, so send your urgent business packages with mailboxes, etc. We'll find the best courier for your parcel and help with packing, tracking and paperwork too. For UK and worldwide delivery this Christmas, search mailboxes, etc. Christmas possible.
Sheila Fogarty on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Now, there are hopeful signs. Again, it's hard to speak about hope when you think of the destruction and the sadness and the death that's still going on in Ukraine, but there are some hopeful signs today of a Russian military retreat from the only state capital it's managed to capture in this dreadful war since February of the city, in the key southern city of Kherson. Russia says it's completed its withdrawal of troops. Now, as winter approaches, as we were saying just the other day on the programme, there is some possibility of talks opening. We shall see, and it's fair to say, I think, that the Ukrainian military and leadership is very cautious about anything that Russia says, and you can see why. What we do know is that the estimates around the numbers of people who've died in this war are pretty shattering. Estimated 100,000 troops on both sides, there or thereabouts, and we know that millions of people, and ordinary civilians, which inevitably involves lots of children, have left Ukraine or left their homes within Ukraine, and the estimate from UNICEF is that almost 1,000 Ukrainian children have died so far in this war, and many more injured as well. Not those companies. And
Account terms, rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over. Living is now nominated for 9 British Independent Film Awards, including Best Film, Best Director, and Best Lead Performance for Bill Nye.
Life just crept up on me.
5 stars from Metro, Empire, and the Daily Mail.
Oh, sir, it's time to live a little.
Time Out are calling Living Bill Nye's career best performance.
Mr. Williams, are you all right?
Never better. I remember what it's like to be alive.
Living in cinemas now.
Serious Tissues, carbon neutral toilet roll. Planting trees instead of cutting them down. Subscribe today for 10% off and free shipping at serioustissues.com.
Tom Strawbridge on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Talk about a problem that I would suspect, I don't know, but I would suspect might be one of the associated consequences of such massive waiting lists for the NHS. We talked about it yesterday, 7.1 million people on a waiting list in England at the moment. And as a result, there's a large increase in the number of people who have left work because of long-term sickness. We'll get the details on that in a few moments. Anna's in Hackney, meantime, to talk about housing. Hi, Anna. Oh, such a brief... oh, no, you're back. Good, we lost you there.
Oh, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
So my disrepair I've been dealing with has been going on for 8 years, and it's nearly a quarter of my life now, and I've been to court twice, and I had to call in. I wasn't going to because I'm actually trying to deal with it now still, and I'm exhausted by it. But when I first heard the lady speak at the beginning of the show, I have to say it's just so untrue with regard to housing stock not being available, because the housing association that I'm in, which is just not fit for purpose, selling off stock onto the auction at the free market, being bought up, and it should be a perfectly great home for a young family, to start. But my issue is this: they have so many people, and they've taken over a housing stock of loads of different associations. No one knows how to run anything. No one talks to each other. They are on incredible salaries. The CEO is on £450,000.
What?
£450,000 a year is the CEO's salary, and it's just ridiculous. And I have ADHD and autism, and I have to work at home. And my home is covered in damp, mould. It's been labelled unfit for human habitation for 3 years. Being told that before the pandemic, and I'm here at home, and I care for my elderly dad. But it's been such a toll on my health. And I'm so sad that I mean, they think they're above the law, because the law, I've been the second time to enforce the first time, and now I'm looking at going again because they flatly refuse to accept that it's got worse because they haven't done anything about it. And I've had scaffolding outside my home since 12th of September 2020. Now tell me where that money is not hemorrhaging, but out. I don't know, but the lady from Lewisham is absolutely spot on. The councils are colluding with them because they have got conflicts of interest. If you go with my autism, I'm quite go down a rabbit hole of investigation sort of thing. And there's people sitting on the boards of housing at the council, environmental health, and on these housing associations. So my doctor called the environmental health. They contacted my housing association. They didn't contact me. And the housing association said, we're getting it sorted, don't worry. That was 2 years ago, and I'm in the same situation now.
Anna, what are the extent of the repairs that you need doing?
I need the whole roof is covered in mould. It's gone to the timbers, it's gone to the structure of 8 years. It does not. I first called in 2014, and
you've been told by someone with authority to be able to describe it as such that it's uninhabitable.
An independent surveyor that I had to get through a solicitor on a no-win, no-fee basis. So he's nothing to do with me, nothing to do with my solicitor, nothing to do with the housing association. He's fully credited, and he's absolutely shocked. And their actual report said the same thing about the workmanship has just been shoddy. So it's like a managed decline, but also just not having a proper proper repair, managed upkeep. I've never seen anybody here in 8 years apart from my disrepair, but not even just doing like the maintenance,
I don't know, Anna. I honestly, I don't know where you get your strength from to keep having to keep go at this for 8 years.
Well, it's the ADHD.
Well, listen, I'm really tempted. Don't do it on air. But would you talk to one of my colleagues off air? And if we can bring any pressure to bear on whoever it is you need pressure to be borne on, then talk to my colleague, because that is absolutely outrageous. And we can all hear the toll that it's taking on you.
Yeah, I'm on medication for anxiety, and it's affecting my ADHD medication. I want to live my life,
Well, listen, Anna, talk to my producer. We'll try and get some more details and see if there is anything we can do in terms of bringing some pressure on some people, because that is absolutely outrageous. That is absolutely outrageous. Thank you for your call. Stay there. My colleague will talk to you. Let's turn to this. The number of people who have dropped out of Britain's job market since 2019 who now cite a long-term illness or mental health problems has risen by 500,000, or about 25%, according to the ONS. The Bank of England is concerned that the number of people leaving Britain's workforce will fuel inflationary pressures, and that the latest labour market data pointed to a record workforce exodus. Nicole Sykes is Director of Policy and Communications at Pro Bono Economics, who have written about these issues. Thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme. Do we know what precisely is causing more long-term illness?
Yeah, I mean, it really is a big mixture of issues. I mean, you heard from that lady, Anna, just there, how housing situations can affect your health as well. Lots of reasons, but three big ones. Firstly, the NHS backlogs, of course, 7.1 million people waiting for operations. If you're waiting to get a hip replacement, you can't be minding a till at Sainsbury's. If you're waiting to get your cataract removed, you can't be driving a taxi or a lorry or like that. I certainly hope you're not. Secondly, long COVID. We don't know a lot about long COVID. It's something that scientists and researchers are digging into. But data out last week suggested about 1.6 million people are reporting that long COVID is still affecting them. 330,000 of them say that's limiting what they can do in their lives to a significant degree. So that's probably playing a big role too.
If that were sorry, Nicole.
Mental health would just be the third one to raise. 22% rise in mental health being the reason that people are dropping out, particularly for younger people. And that's where we're seeing a really alarming fast rise, is the number of younger people dropping out of that job market.
On the long COVID point, I just wonder because the figures I saw from when the Financial Times did some reporting about this was that this is a bigger problem in Britain than any other country in Europe. And I just wondered to what extent, if long COVID were a big chunk of this, why aren't there similar numbers of workforce dropouts across the rest of Europe, indeed across the rest of the world?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as I said, I do think it's a mix of issues. I think it can be a mix of issues for an individual as well. We're probably not dropping out of the labour market for one reason. It's probably a number of them. But if you look at some of the sectors of the economy where you're seeing this being the biggest problem, it is retail and it's warehousing and logistics, which are jobs that either people are more likely to have accidents in, they're more likely to be physical jobs where you're either standing all day or you're lifting things, but also some of them are jobs where you are more likely to be exposed to COVID. And also they're much more difficult to do from home. You can't run a pet shop from your sofa, but maybe you can manage an illness, maybe part-time, if you're able to work from home doing admin or IT jobs or whatever it is. But you're definitely seeing a lot of factors in play as a result of that.
Presumably, just finally, Nicole, this is only going to get worse if waiting list times are a problem, if mental health provision is problematic, people struggle to get the help that they need. This is only going to get worse.
Yeah, and I think that's a big concern. But I guess on the other hand, there is stuff that can be done about it. Businesses can play a really big role. About half of private sector employees have no access to support at work if they get ill. So businesses can be playing a preventative role with their workforce, helping to keep them healthy. Also, they can be looking at how do we get older people back into work, how we make it more welcoming for that, because we know you have to work really hard to do that if you're an employer. How can we offer more flexible working? Government could be looking at how it works with charities as well. Charities are really, really good. If you've got arthritis, They're looking at how can we help you physically, how can we help you with what this is doing to your mental health, and how can we help you with employment. So they really do the wraparound work around people that things like job coaches and job centres, quite frankly, aren't set up to do.
Yeah.
So actually there's lots and lots of organisations that can help.
And there are definitely more have been retired people going back into the world of work as well. Nicole, good to speak to you. Thank you. Nicole Sykes, Director of Policy and Communications at Pro Bono Economics, who have obviously, as you heard, have been looking into this particular issue. It's grim out there. Look, the news is terrible at the moment. Everything seems pretty down, bad, gloomy and doomy, but actually some of the more hopeful and optimistic elements of this world come, I think, from the unbelievable scientific and technological breakthroughs that are happening. And to that end, in a few moments' time,
we have known genetic mutations that underlie disease. And so one of the thoughts is, if we know what mutations cause disease, why not just go in and replace it?
Scientists have tailored DNA editing technology to fast-track how the body fights cancer cells. Get the details in just a moment. 4:45.
LBC Travel, I'm Dave. Golf on the M20 eastbound. 2 lanes are closed because of an accident between the M25 and Junction 2 for a route term. So there are queues back along the M25 clockwise from Junction 2 for the A2 and along the A20 eastbound at Swanley. There are queues in Wandsworth on the A3 West Hill in both directions of the South Circular Upper Richmond Road because of the roadworks. In Dulwich, there are delays on the South Circular eastbound at the Grove because of roadworks. On the trains, Thameslink have delays of up to 15 minutes and cancellations between St Pancras and St Albans and between St Pancras and Sutton. That's because of some damage to the overhead wires. And London North Eastern Railway have delays of up to half an hour from Peterborough going into King's Cross. That's because of a damaged platform at Huntingdon.
LBC.
The Sky Connect Black Friday sale is now on. Just half price for 12 months on all business broadband packages. So you can stay better connected for less with prices as low as $14.95 a month. And switching is simple thanks to our dedicated account managers who are with you every step of the way. Don't miss out. Switch today. Go to skyconnect.uk/Black Friday. New customers only. $14.95 a month for 12 months. $29.95 thereafter. 24 or 36-month contract only. £12 delivery. Prices exclude 20% VAT and may vary during this period. Further terms apply. Offer ends 8th December.
Call Tom Swarbrick 0345 6060 973 LBC.
Albert Einstein here. Chico and I are out for walkies in the park. My watch tells me we've walked exactly 3,004 steps. Our personal best. Our steps aren't the only thing we track. Our smart meter display at home tells us how much energy we use daily, weekly and monthly, which can help me make changes to save energy. And now my watch tells me it's time to head back for a cuppa. Right, Chico?
For extra help managing your household budgets, search Get a Smart Meter today. Consumer action required. Eligibility may vary.
Do your teeth stop you from smiling and eating? Do you hate the thought of false teeth? Talk to TDC about Smile in a Day dental implants. TDC Smile in a Day dental implants look and work just like real teeth, so you can eat what you want and smile when you want.
I just wish I'd gone to TDC years ago.
Let TDC restore your teeth and your smile. Book your consultation today. Visit smileinaday.co.uk.
For over 100 years, Bristol Street Motors has understood how to make a big difference.
So from now till this Monday, we're offering you low-rate finance of just 6.9% APR representative for up to 5 years on all our quality used cars.
With a 14-day money-back guarantee for total peace of mind.
And we'll look after you and your car by giving you 2 years free servicing too.
These offers are available now but must end this Monday.
So visit your nearest Bristol Street Motors dealership or bristolstreet.co.uk.
FCA regulated credit broker, not a lender, but can introduce you to a selected panel of lenders. We will typically receive a commission from the lender. Details available, T's and C's apply.
UK Export Finance can help your business grow overseas. Last year, we helped UK exporters access £7.4 billion of support by providing government-backed finance and insurance. We can help you win export contracts with attractive finance terms. Got orders overseas? Fulfill them with a working capital loan. Exporting to a challenging market? Make sure you get paid with the right insurance.
To get the exporter's edge, search UK Export Finance or call us on 0800 538 5111.
Can a smart thermostat reduce my bills?
A lot of people are asking this question right now, and the easy answer is yes, it can. In fact, our sleek new Hive Thermostat Mini could save you up to £311 per year on your energy bills. The Hive Mini helps you control your heating and hot water from wherever you are, reducing energy waste, all for a one-off £119. Search Hive Smart Thermostat. Terms and exclusions apply. Savings based on an average annual energy consumption of 10,578 kilowatts per hour at 10.3p per kilowatts per hour.
London, we're free now. Free now to munch lunch at food markets. Free now to watch clocks shop. Free now to get covered in popcorn. Free now to yoga spin hits and finally have a go at all of it. Free now to... And we're free now. The app where you can book fast black cabs on tap, instant private rides, and breezy Tier E scooters. Geographic exclusions apply. All at the tap of an app. Free now. Get there your way. Download the app and ride now.
Jen said it can't be done. Dad said, sounds a bit niche. The agency said, website's live. My CEO pal said, like it, we'll share. My brother said, what if something goes wrong? The insurance website said, your business is fully covered. Investor Tom said, expansion plans look good. The bank said, loans approved. The insurer said, it's more complex now, but nothing we can't sort out. I said, and they said it couldn't be done. Insurance for businesses that know their own mind. Superscript. Customised, effortless, fair.
This is LBC with Tom Swarbrick. Text 84850.
I wouldn't hold your breath, but we might actually bring you some good news in a few moments' time. Stand by. Brian's a new caller, though, in Swaffham meantime. Hi, Brian.
Hello, Tom. I'm a first-time caller. It's a pleasure to speak to you for the first time.
Thank you for being there. What made you pick up the phone?
I had worked for about 20 years in the local authority as a surveyor, dealing with a lot of the problems that I often hear come up in news reports about mould and problems in housing and breathing difficulties and all the rest of it.
And how often were you called to homes that displayed those?
It was quite a large part of my project and portfolio to deal with quite a lot of the time, yes. And it's a complex factor. It's there is some housing stock which is obviously built up quickly after the war, and the building has improved now and construction improved. But obviously we all know that there's a shortage of money to build new stock, etc. But sometimes the 1930s and the 50s housing stock that's built out of brick with typical tiled roofs, which you might find in the private sector as well, also had a lot of the problems. And I would say, if there is something like rising damp or ingress from roofs or problems with leaks, etc., the council will usually deal with that in a programme and sort out that. But the vast majority of the mould problems that I came across was just a lifestyle matter, and a lot of the time we gave leaflets and information to tenants on how to manage their properties, you see, because I would go into a property where, you had an elderly couple and they'd been living there since, 1936 or something for their whole life or whatever, and there wasn't a single bit of mould. And I could go next door where there was maybe a young family with a lot of children and they had significant mould problems, and yet the two properties were identical.
Listen, Brian, listen, I think that, I'm sure that that's the case. If you need to open a window if it gets very hot and steamy or what have you, and take that responsibility of looking after it when you're in there. However, I do think in the circumstances where you have got mould that is present that could cause illness to the people inside, it is up to the council to respond and deal with it.
Yes, and sometimes if it is a significant problem, they will move them to a different property, and I have seen that where the problem starts to occur again, because you go to the property and you try to explain, and the tenants have covered the air vents with plastic bags and sticky tape. They don't open the windows. They put, say, for instance, their wet clothing on radiators to dry, and the air isn't changed. And I've explained so many times, I spent a lot of my life to explain the fact that if you was to open your windows in the morning for 15 minutes or half an hour, just a bit to change the air, and then again in the evening, it would make a significant difference, because the warmer the air is, the more moisture it holds.
Well, I think that, and I think that's a fair point. That is part of the responsibility of being in there, isn't it? Is to look after it. But as we've been hearing, there are lots of circumstances where it isn't that person's fault, and they haven't been able to get the help that they need in order to make it habitable. Brian, good first time call. Thank you very much for it indeed. Let's turn to that good news, shall we? Scientists have tailored DNA editing technology to turbocharge how the body fights cancer cells in what's being described as a potential breakthrough. They modified patients' genes to instruct cancer-fighting cells to swarm tumours using CRISPR, which is given as a one-off injection. Dr. Sam Godfrey is Research Information Lead at Cancer Research UK. Thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme. It's fair to say that this is tricky and techy, so I don't propose to go into all of the details because I won't understand it, but how significant might this actually be?
It's a really interesting thing. I think the first thing to say is it is a first step. We're not there yet, but what it's doing is it's training our own white blood cells to recognise cancer, because our body does that naturally anyway. We all develop cancer cells all the time, and our body's pretty good actually at mopping it up, and it's only when cancer develops a couple of extra tricks up its sleeve that it gets established. In this case, what the scientists have done in the US is they have used a technique called CRISPR, which is pretty much like some molecular scissors that can chop out instructions within the DNA to basically turn on the white blood cells that already recognise cancer and reactivate them. They then take them out of the body, grow up an army of them, and put them back into the body, and that can treat people. It's very exciting, I think.
And that's individualised, that's tailored for the individual person because of that. Yeah,
that's the main part. I think we've done this before. So, I mean, one of the world's first clinical trials of a similar thing was tried in London for this. But what's happened before has always been quite generalised, whereas here what they're doing is they're matching the individual cancers. They're specific white blood cells for each person's cancer, and that is a little bit special. There are some challenges with it, of course. It will be phenomenally expensive to do this routinely, which is a big problem. And I think what we're seeing here is we're seeing the first steps into this space. In the future, what we'll be able to do will be something slightly different, where we'll be able to get the body to pretty much do all of this inside, and then I feel that's where we're going in the future. So I think this is a great, interesting first step, but there's still quite a lot of things to overcome, but it will be a new future treatment.
I want to ask you about the future in just a second, but how effective, in the study that was done using this method, how actually effective was it?
It wasn't sort of groundbreakingly effective, which I think they looked at 16 people, 5 of them saw a good response, and that's pretty typical for immunotherapies. I think one of the challenges we have with using the immune system is, for a lot of people, no matter what we do, it doesn't yet work. We think we're beginning, so some research that came out of London recently thinks they found out why it doesn't work for everyone, so that's going to lead to a whole new raft of ideas. But for those it does work for, you're getting this targeted response against the cancer, which is exciting.
So how in the future, Doctor, are you going to make the body do that internally rather than lifting it out?
That's a great question. There's a load of different approaches.
There's a Nobel Prize in it for you as much as anything else, Sam, I think.
I'm going to use your recommendation for that then. That'll get me tagged with that prize. I think there's a number of different ways you can do it. One of the ways, this CRISPR way was one way of individually editing genes. I think another way that's very promising is using vaccines or viruses to actually change the white blood cells. And then there's a third way where you're probably taking off some sort of generic breaks that exist within the body that are holding back the immune system. So there's a few different approaches. All of them are showing promise. All of them have got drawbacks. And it's going to be about fine-tuning that ready for the future of cancer treatment.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Really, really fascinating. Dr. Sam Godfrey, Research Information Lead at Cancer Research UK. Jammer's a new caller in Tower Hamlets. Hi, Jammer.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, it's regarding the housing.
Yes.
I got like 2 kids with autism. I've been waiting to be rehoused. I live overcrowded for the last 12 years. And I went to see the mayor of Luva Rahman, and basically nothing's happening, and I got like 2 kids with autism, and I've been trying to get hold of the housing team, and they're not budging.
What do they say to you as to the reason why nothing's happening?
I give them all the documents from my doctors and all the professionals. They said my 2 kids need their own space and they need a bigger house, and they just told me to wait. That's it.
They told you to wait?
Like just to wait. And I've been waiting like 12 years.
12 years. I mean, I just don't think there is any excuse, even if the answer isn't what you were hoping for, that it's not possible or it can't be done or that it might take a long time, whatever. Information about nothing is better than no information at all in your circumstances.
Yes. Well, basically, I went to see the mayor, the new mayor, Luva Rahman, 3 months ago, and he's supposed to send a letter to them But they're not even answering him.
Right. And I was going to ask what's their excuse for that, but presumably if you asked, you wouldn't get an answer anyway. How are these people held accountable?
Nobody. That's what I'm saying. The law says in Tower Hamlets, I read it, and I went to see a lawyer, and it says after 12 years, they're supposed to rehouse you anyway. That's their own law. And I passed that, and then I got 2 kids who got autistic. I can't go to work sometimes because, the house is too small for us, and,
I think it's absolutely outrageous, again, that when I find it makes me so angry when you cannot get an answer from those you need an answer from, whose job it is to at least give you some information about what's going on, even if they can't actually do it for whatever reason, and you might have arguments with them about what the reason is. It is unbelievable that people are left waiting in the dark about information from those people whose only reason to be on earth in that job is to try and help them. Gemma, thank you very much indeed for your call. You're listening to Tom Swarbrick on LBC. These are the headlines at 5.
We advance slowly so not to be lured into some trap that the Russians are trying to set up.
Ukraine's flag is raised above administrative buildings in Kherson as the country's military re-enters the city after Russia retreat.
And he's going to give us the name of the agent Moscow planted inside our setup. We have a mole, Jim.
Like something out of a John le Carré novel, a security guard admits spying for Russia while working at the British Embassy in Berlin.
What we need is a plan that shows how we're going to get through this difficult period.
The Chancellor warns of a tough road ahead as the UK economy steps closer to recession. And
I'm just constantly feeling like I'm not giving my children enough, not giving my work enough.
Early years providers warn nurseries will raise prices or close because of funding cuts. More on this to come.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 5 o'clock. People have been filmed celebrating in Kherson as Ukrainian soldiers begin entering the city and the country's flags are raised. Moscow says it has completed its retreat to the opposite bank of the Dnipro River. Ukrainian MP Alexei Goncharenko says it's a joyous moment.
That is the end of Putin's attempts to take the southern part of Ukraine. This is the end of his strategy to cut off Ukraine from the sea. So this is a very big day, and I'm absolutely happy.
The Kremlin claims it didn't lose a single soldier as it withdrew 30,000 men, but Kyiv says a number drowned while leaving. A British security guard is facing 14 years in prison after admitting spying for Russia while working at the British Embassy in Berlin. Prosecutors say 58-year-old David Ballantyne Smith was driven by an intense hatred for his own country. The Chancellor says he's working to make a possible recession shallower and quicker in his autumn budget. But Jeremy Hunt has warned he will be making eye-watering decisions as the economy has stepped closer to recession. Official figures show GDP shrank by 0.2% between July and September. A court's ruled a man found in a COVID ward in a hospital in Glasgow is an American wanted for rape. The sheriff found the man is in fact Nicholas Rossi, a fugitive who faked his own death. The 35-year-old has been trying to convince Scottish authorities he's Arthur Knight, an orphan from Ireland. Speaking with an oxygen mask earlier this year, the 35-year-old maintained he was innocent of the allegations.
I can veritably say that I have not ever once done any of the acts.
An extradition hearing is due in March. And a total of 58 people have now been charged after Just Stop Oil carried out 4 days of protests on the M25. Environmental activists climbed up onto gantries over the motorway, forcing it to close in several places. A police officer hurt in a rolling roadblock in Essex has thanked people for their support. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 57 points at 73.18. The pound buys $1.17 and €1.14. LBC weather, patchy light rain for southern Scotland and northern England tonight. Dry elsewhere, a low of 6. Staying cloudy in Scotland and Northern Ireland tomorrow, with further rain in the far northwest. A mixture of cloud and sunny spells for England and Wales, highs of 14 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Tom Swarbrick.
Very good afternoon to you. 4 minutes past 5 the time. Tom Swarbrick with you here on LBC. How big do you want your recession? Next week, the Chancellor will set out plans to plug a big hole in the UK finances, and some of what he chooses to do, alongside the Bank of England's decisions, will affect the length and depth of the looming recession. But the accepted reality is we are heading for one. Indeed, the data out today says the economy contracted by 0.2% during the last 3 months, as soaring prices hit businesses and households, and the expectation is the government is going to have to cut services. Currently, the Office for Budget Responsibility is assuming that the government spending will rise by 3.7% a year after the spending review period comes to an end in 2025. But reporting in the Times today says that Jeremy Hunt is expected to tell the OBR that the government intends to cut this significantly. The Treasury is modelling for public spending increases of between just 1% and 2% prior to a formal announcement in the autumn statement next week. That means, the Times says, finding spending cuts from non-ring-fenced departments, which looks like there's going to be some cuts coming for those non-protected areas such as the Home Office budget, Ministry of Justice, Transport and local government. Education, transport and the police being cut again in what I think looks very much like, sounds very much like, possibly even smells very much like austerity 2.0. Here was the Chancellor speaking earlier.
According to the International Monetary Fund, around a third of the world's economy is in recession this year or will be in recession next year. And that is principally, but not entirely, because of very high global energy prices. We are not immune to that in the UK, and what we need is a plan that shows how we're going to get through this difficult period. If it is a recession, how we make it shallower and quicker, so that we can protect businesses who are really struggling, as these figures show, but also give families some hope that we will get through to the other side with the most vulnerable people protected. If we are going to bring down debt over the medium term and give people confidence that we are paying our way as a country, then yes, there is a very substantial gap in our national finances. And not just us. Germany has announced that they are controlling their borrowing. Italy has done the same. The United States is raising taxes by $800 billion to bring down inflation. So these are global factors, partly because of what's happening in Ukraine, partly because of the pandemic, that all of us are having to come to terms with. And the sooner we do that, the quicker we can give families and businesses hope that there is a way through the very difficult challenges we face.
It's interesting listening to the Chancellor there set up the justification and the global context, I think as he's trying to put it, for what he's going to have to do. But I wonder whether you think he actually has to do this. He talks about Italy borrowing, he talks about Germany's borrowing rates, he talks about the taxes going up in America. Taxes are going to go up here, spending is going to shrink from what it was pre-2021 to what it's going to have to be now. The next few years are going to be very tough. The Bank of England talking about a possible 8-quarter-long recession. But Jeremy Hunt is trying to persuade you, well, we need to do this now, and then in a few years' time, things will look a little rosy. Do you accept that? Do you accept that narrative about what's coming, particularly after 2008 and the cuts to public services there were in 2008? It may well be that those cuts were a lot more than that Jeremy Hunt's going to do. But do you accept that this needs to happen now, to the extent that it looks like it's going to happen, because on the other side of it, the good times will roll? That's not what happened after 2008, is it? 0345 6060 973. Paul's in Oxford on this. Paul.
Hi Tom, I'm ringing up because I listen to your show all the time at LBC, and
Thank you, sir.
I always hear about the problems, the nurses, there's not enough money going around, and I don't hear enough talk about the solutions. And I think that we should all be talking a lot more about the fact there's billionaires buying yachts and spending £200,000 on a single toilet or bidet, let alone the whole toilet room, just on a marble surface. We all need to, as a society, go and stand up and say this isn't fair. Unregulated capitalism by the Tory government for 12 years and let all that money funnel away. It's all gone somewhere.
When you say unregulated, what do you mean?
Underregulated. There should have been less loopholes. There should be more regulation. There should have been, hang on a minute, that's not right, let's sort that. But they're all going, well, that's our mates, we better let that slide. You know, I mean...
Do you think some people, Paul, should be stopped from being able to be billionaires?
Yes, it's immoral. It shouldn't be allowed. You can be rich beyond wildest dreams, but once you've got over a certain level, because it's a disease, it's hoarded. It's basically when someone's living in a council flat and you can't move around because they're a hoarder, you think that's a mental illness. When a billionaire has all that money, he's mentally ill. We need to go over there and say, look, mate, you're taking it a bit too far. We need some of that back.
I just see, Paul, I am instinctively against that. I'm not a billionaire, never going to be a billionaire at this rate. But I'm instinctively against the idea of setting a limit on how much a person can earn.
Well, okay, that's fair enough, but we can make it so it doesn't go so far like it has by more regulation, less loopholes, more fairness.
Well, I think that the search for more fairness is absolutely right, and of course people can debate until the cows come home about what is and is not fair, and there will be plenty of people suggesting, Paul, I think, those perhaps who work in schools, those who work in the criminal justice system, those who work in the police, that they might say, well, hang on a minute, we've just come out of, we thought we were coming out of the last round of cuts and the effects that those cuts have. Why do we have to do it again? Why us again?
Well, exactly. Now's the time to say, look, we're going to call some money back, just for, like a windfall tax on billionaires, not just the corporations. And the thing is, when people get so rich, the billionaires and the corporations got so rich, money makes money. They're only going to get richer. The gap's only going to get bigger.
No, I don't disagree with you there, but I think that's coming. I mean, it might not be to the extent that you would like, Paul, because I'm not sure a Conservative government, I don't even think a Labour government, would limit how much money an individual could earn, that the state would put a parameter on that. I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think that those people who earn their money through dividends, those who earn their money in shares, those perhaps who are selling property to earn some money, I think they are going to be taxed far, far more through what Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak are going to come up with, out of a hope to try and make it fairer. Paul, thank you very much indeed. 03456060973 is the number. Michael Jacobs joins us, Professor of Political Economy at the University of Sheffield, former Special Advisor to Prime Minister Gordon Brown. Thank you for coming on again, Michael. I wonder if you see in what Jeremy Hunt is looking like he's going to do, I wonder whether you see any Brownism in it.
No, I don't think I do. Jeremy Hunt is claiming through all these leaks and briefings, and we have to remember that we're still more than a week away from his fiscal statement. But there's been all these briefings, little interviews, leaks and so on to the media. So the question you must ask is why is he doing that? And I think he's trying to prepare us to expect
And at peak times, do things feel a little constricted? Well, not when you get full fiber broadband from EE. You get the peak time speeds you pay for. Count on EE, full fiber broadband, powered by BT.
Limited availability. Check coverage at ee.co.uk/coverage.
Some people think the metaverse will only be virtual. But did you know that surgeons will be able to practice complex operations virtually before treating patients in real hospitals? And using virtual reality, school students will travel back in time to deepen their understanding of history firsthand. The metaverse may be virtual, but the impact will be real. Learn how Meta is helping to build the metaverse at meta.com/metaverseimpact/EN.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC with Tom Swarbrick.
It is Friday. It is 10 to 6. It is LBC, which means it's time for one thing. It's time to kick back, chillax, and prepare for the best of the best. From Washington, D.C., this is Simon Mark's American Week.
Tom, we made it through the week. The country isn't aflame, the midterm elections are behind us, or they will be if they ever finish counting the votes. The president, though, isn't waiting. A man taking a victory lap, despite the fact that the Democrats haven't actually won.
Our democracy has been tested in recent years, but with their votes, the American people have spoken and proven once again that democracy is who we are.
He sounded at his Wednesday press conference like a man who thinks the threat to American democracy is over, in much the same way as a few weeks ago he said the COVID-19 pandemic is over. Neither assertion is true, but the president seized on the fact that the midterms failed to deliver the Republican tsunami of support that former President Donald Trump and others had predicted as evidence that the fever on America's political brow is passing.
While the press and the pundits are predicting a giant red wave, it didn't happen. And I know you were somewhat miffed by my obsessive optimism, but I felt good during the whole process. I thought we were going to do fine. While any seat lost is painful, some good Democrats didn't win the last night. Democrats had a strong night.
Just not strong enough to retain control of the House of Representatives. Votes are still being counted, but the White House concedes the Republicans will end up with a slim majority. As for the Senate, it's completely up for grabs, and maybe all the way through to a runoff election in the state of Georgia that won't happen until early December. It is true that Joe Biden is not facing the massive midterm loss of legislative seats meted out to Barack Obama and Bill Clinton before him. And that's remarkable because months ago, Democrats feared their goose was cooked. But on Tuesday, concerns about democracy and abortion rights brought Democrats their own tsunami of support to the polls, saving the party from disaster. However, when January rolls around and the Republicans control the House, Joe Biden will find it much harder to get things done, even if the Democrats cling on to the Senate.
What in the next 2 years do you intend to do differently?
Nothing, because they're just finding out what we're doing. The more they know about what we're doing, the more support there is.
That answer encapsulates the White House view that if only the media did a better job of explaining Biden's record to the voters would understand and love him more. In fact, 2/3 of them told exit pollsters they do not want him to seek another term in office. But for those craving generational change atop the Democratic Party, the president, who turns 80 in just 9 days' time, had only bad news on Wednesday.
The fact that the Democratic Party outperformed anything anyone expected is one that gives everybody like, whew, sigh of relief. When I announce, if I announce, my intention is that I run again, but I'm a great respecter of fate, and this is ultimately a family decision. I think everybody wants me to run, but we're going to have discussions about it.
Discussions, he said, between now and Christmas. Last Saturday on Matt Fry's LBC program, Biden's former chief of staff, Susan Platt, told us how those conversations go.
It's always come down to Jill. I remember being at his home one year when the time when I worked for him, and we were talking about re-election, and it ultimately comes down to two people, really. I mean, Joe Biden, yes, makes the decision, but his sister Valerie and his wife Jill.
the power behind the throne. At the other end of America's political spectrum, there is, of course, only one decision maker, and Donald Trump may have made a huge tactical error on Monday night at a final midterm rally in the battleground state of Ohio. So confident was he that his conspiracy theory-believing, election-denying candidates would sweep into office all over the country that, to the backing of a string orchestra, he got out in front of his own skis.
I'm going to be making a very big announcement on Tuesday, November 15th at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida.
24 hours later, that didn't seem like such a sharp move. As the results started coming in, the red wave that he'd demanded from Republicans turned into a red trickle. He released a video while polls in some states were still open, trying to play the entirely false election fraud card all over again.
They say that the machines aren't working. They say that they're running out of paper in different locations throughout different states. There's a lot of bad things going on.
But the only thing that was running out was the former president's run of luck, and that became apparent several hours later in Pennsylvania.
I never expected that we were going to turn these red counties blue, but we did what we needed to do, and tonight, that's why I'll be the next U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania.
Democrat John Fetterman easily disposing of the challenge from Trump-backed Republican candidate Dr. Mehmet Oz. All over the country, many Trump candidates found themselves either losing or in much tighter races than they expected, including former NFL star Herschel Walker down in Georgia. His Senate race against incumbent Democrat Raphael Warnock is the one heading for a December runoff, which is in and of itself pretty extraordinary. As regular listeners will recall, Mr. Walker is not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. Here he is explaining global warming to his supporters back in July.
Since we don't control the air, our good air decided to float over to China and bad air. So when China gets our good air, their bad air gotta move. So it moves over to our good air space.
There are actually people in that crowd saying, that's right. USA Today called his mere candidacy a stain on American democracy, and yet he is a cat's whisker away from becoming a member of the Senate. He could still win and join other Trump-backed winners on Tuesday, including...
I know it will be the honor of a lifetime to serve as Arkansas's 47th governor and the first female governor. The state of Arkansas is
Sarah Huckabee Sanders, whom you will remember lied relentlessly to reporters and the public on Donald Trump's behalf when she was his White House press secretary. So it's a mixed bag. Some of Tuesday's Republican winners assuredly owe their success to the former president, but others do not.
We have embraced freedom. We have maintained law and order. We have protected the rights of parents, and we reject woke ideology.
Governor Ron DeSantis of the Sunshine State of Florida, who has assiduously kept Donald Trump at arm's length and who, in his own right, won 60% of the vote in his race for re-election. In his victory speech, he indicated a war on woke might be a better bet for the Republicans in 2024 than tilting at non-existent election fraud windmills.
We fight the woke in the legislature. We fight the woke in the schools. We fight the woke in the corporations. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. Florida is where woke goes to die.
And you thought it was where tourists go to see Disney. The smart Republican money is moving rapidly in the governor's direction. Rupert Murdoch's New York Post featured him in a front-page splash on Wednesday with a headline describing DeSantis as the future. In case the message didn't get through to Mar-a-Lago, Thursday's paper showed Trump sitting precariously on a wall with the headline Trumpty Dumpty. Asked at the White House who he fears more in 2024, DeSantis or Trump, President Biden with this one-liner.
It'll be fun watching them take on each other.
And indeed, Tom, it will be.
Another big American week, courtesy of LBC's Simon Marks. I'm back next week. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player. You can also find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as all of Global's live radio stations. Download Global Player for free from your app store. Head to globalplayer.com.
lewis.com. Coming up at 9 on LBC, it's the Consumer Hour with lawyer Dean Dunham. Next, Lewis Goodall.
Thanks, Tom. Seemed like a quiet day in Westminster today, but it hasn't been, because right now the Chancellor and the Prime Minister are writing up the autumn statement, next week's big political event which will shape political debate and indeed the everyday lives of millions of people for years to come. Jeremy Hunt is talking about having to cut public services to fill a huge black hole, he says, in Britain's public finances. But does he really have to do that? How have we gone from being lectured that the only thing which mattered was growth to the same party telling us the only thing which matters is the public finances? With the UK economy already heading towards recession, isn't slashing public services exactly the medicine our economy does not need? 0345 60 60 973.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, citizens have raised the Ukrainian flag in the centre of Kherson as Russia claims it has completed its retreat. Troops were ordered to withdraw from the southern city earlier this week as Moscow claimed it was struggling to send in supplies. The Kremlin says its forces left without losing a single soldier, while Kyiv claims some drowned as they tried to flee. Ukrainian MP Dmytro Nataluka has told LBC many others have been left behind.
The communication of the Russians is so bad that they have left an enormous amount of people behind them, specific units, military units, who don't know what to do. Either they should stand the ground and keep their position, or they should leave, or should they take the equipment with them, should they leave it there. So it's a disaster in terms of the communication.
A man has admitted spying for Russia while working as a security guard at the British Embassy in Berlin. The Old Bailey heard 58-year-old David Ballantyne Smith handed over documents as he had a hatred for his own country. He's facing 14 years in prison. Labour has accused the government of leading the country through a decade of weak growth and inequality. Official figures have revealed GDP shrank by 0.2% between July and September. The Chancellor has warned of a tough road ahead, but insists the problems are largely down to the war in Ukraine. Former Special Advisor to Gordon Brown, Michael Jacobs, has told LBC Jeremy Hunt is trying to prepare us for the worst.
I think he's trying to prepare us to expect big spending cuts, and then he's going to do less than that. And he's going to say, no, because we are such clever people, we are not going to do spending cuts in the rest of this Parliament. They will happen after the election. So I don't think he's being fully honest with us, and I think the Treasury are playing games with the public.
Iran's most senior diplomat in Britain has been summoned to the Foreign Office following credible threats to the lives of UK journalists. The Foreign Secretary says intimidation of any kind towards members of the press will not be tolerated. And Birmingham has been chosen to host the European Athletics Championships in 2026. The joint bid with UK Athletics comes after the city delivered a hugely successful Commonwealth Games earlier this year. It will be the first time the UK has ever hosted the event. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 57 points at 73.18. The pound buys $1.17 and €1.14. LBC weather: patchy light rain for southern Scotland and northern England tonight. Dry elsewhere, a low of 6. Staying cloudy in Scotland and Northern Ireland tomorrow, with further rain in the far northwest. A mixture of cloud and sunny spells for England and Wales. Highs of 14 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Lewis Goodall.
Good evening, Lewis Goodall here for the next 3 hours, taking you through the politics of the week and indeed the politics to come next week. And in a way, that's what we're going to be focusing on, looking ahead to next Thursday and yet another fiscal event. You may think we've had quite enough of them already. We already have Phil with the mini budget 7 weeks ago today. But in fact, we're going to have an autumn statement from the Conservative Party and Conservative government, which is designed, apparently, so they say, to correct the mistakes and rectify the mistakes of the mini-budget, itself another fiscal event from the Conservative Party and the Conservative government. And of course, so much has changed in that time, not least the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer in only 7 weeks. But we are being told to prepare for what Jeremy Hunt, the new Chancellor, says could be eye-watering cuts in the public sector and in public spending. Now, the really interesting thing about all of this, we heard in the news there, perhaps the idea that maybe, and politicians often do this, and the Chancellor often does this, tries to tell us, to give us an impression of something, and only to back away from it at the last minute, because actually they've been very, very wise with the public finances, and they've shown that they don't have to do that after all. But let's take the Chancellor and the Prime Minister at face value. We certainly know that the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, above all things, is a fiscal conservative. It's one of the things that so motivates his politics. He talks about the idea of having to balance the books for his mother in the pharmacy in Southampton, where he grew up working for her. So let's assume that they mean what they say. I think the big question for politics over the next week or so is whether or not this Conservative government and this Conservative Party are overcorrecting from themselves, that they respond to £45 billion of unfunded tax cuts under Liz Truss, to about £55 billion of tax rises and spending cuts under Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak. Now, they say they're doing it to try and restore credibility and faith from the markets. To some extent, that has already happened. We know that gilt prices, government borrowing costs and so on in the pound, they've stabilised significantly, partly in response to what they expect in the autumn statement. The danger has got to be the problem of overcorrection, that the Conservative Party and Conservative government decide that the cuts they have to make end up being so severe that they drag the economy down, that they take demand out of the economy, so much demand out of the economy, at precisely the point that the economy is struggling already. What did we have news of today? We found that the economy had shrunk larger, more than economists expected. Gross domestic product, the sum total of national income over the last 3 months, between August and September, fell by 0.6%, the ONS said today. A larger drop than the 0.4% forecast by economists. Output fell by 0.2% between the second and third quarters, the first contraction in more than a year. And if you compare that to what is going on in other economies around the world as well, the other G7 economies, the UK is now the only one shrinking. If you look at economic growth from July to September, the United States up 0.6%, Canada up 0.4%, Italy up 0.5%, someone I often talked about as a basket case economy, France up 0.2%, Japan 0.3%, Germany grown by 0.2%, and the UK shrunk by 0.2%. And in that context, can it really be wise for the government to decide to undertake a programme of tax rises and spending cuts? Now, the Chancellor likes to try and say that this is the only choice he has, but he, in fact, this morning really kind of admitted that he doesn't have to take out that amount of money. He could potentially choose another way. Just listen to this.
There is some choice over the rules, what I call the fiscal rules, that you choose to follow, and there's also uncertainty in any projections. But there isn't uncertainty about a basic choice we make as a country, which is whether we're going to pay our way. And if we don't give that certainty to the world, what we'll see is higher interest rates, higher inflation, more instability, and more worries for families and businesses. And that's why it's so important to show the world that we are a country that pays our way.
It's important just to remember something when you hear about politicians talking about paying our way. That would imply that the government, like a household, has to balance its budgets all of the time. Of course it doesn't. Only for 8 years, all of the years since 1945, has the UK government has spent less than is taken in taxes, i.e. been in credit, in surplus. Every other year they've borrowed from the capital markets. There's a question about how much you can borrow, how wise it is to borrow, but it certainly isn't true that every single year the UK government has to pay its way. It depends on the political and economic choices that governments makes. But if you're wondering what Hunt's choice is going to be and will involve for the rest of us, he also made that pretty clear today.
It's not going to be easy. There are going to be some very difficult choices. I've used the word eye-watering before, and that's the truth. But we're going to make those choices to give nurses, public sector workers, actually all families and businesses who are worrying at the moment, that certainty that there's a plan in place.
So the question is, do you think that the Chancellor really ought to be talking about these cuts at precisely the time that there is a real slump in the economy, when the economy is shrinking. Do you think that the eye-watering cuts, as he talks about them, are necessary? How do you think those public services will be affected? Those are public services that you use. Talk in the newspapers today, in the Times today, for example, of a big squeeze on schools and transport. Worth bearing in mind, schools, in real terms, per pupil funding is no greater than it was in 2010. The gap between state school and private school is now enormous. That could potentially get even worse under such proposals. Or perhaps you think that the Chancellor is just talking economic common sense. This is the only option necessary after the mini-budget. 0345 6060 973, text 84850. Keen to hear what you think. But first, let's talk to Vicky Price, Chief Economic Advisor for the Centre of Economics and Business Research and a former joint head of the Government Economic Service. Vicky, all this talk of eye-watering cuts, do you think that's wise?
It's not particularly wise to be talking about that. And also, I can't quite see where those eye-watering cuts would come, because as you rightly said, loads of services need extra support. Of course, the NHS needs it. There has already been some commitment for defence spending because of Ukraine. And remember, there was a restatement of the support for Ukraine with the new people at the top, if you like. So that is likely to continue. So, if you cut everything else, then you could perhaps have some extra billion. And in fact, the calculations from the IFS are that if you cut day-to-day spending on public services, except the NHS and the Ministry of Defence by 15%, you could indeed raise 35 billion. But that, of course, means very deep cuts in areas which have already suffered huge austerity. So I'm trying to think of where some of the big cuts would happen, and the only thing that I can think of is that they will happen in infrastructure and capital spending, which of course would be terrible for longer-term growth of the economy.
And of course, all of this happens in an environment where inflation is high, and so real terms cost, both in terms of the wage bill, but also in terms of all the other things that government departments have to buy. In effect, that's making cuts already for many departments. That's before with potential spending cuts to come.
Absolutely. And also, if you look at the other side, which is the tax increasing side, we have perhaps windfall taxes. There's already been some suggestion that those will be there for longer and they will raise a bit of extra money. So maybe they are looking at the financial sector as well, which is making huge profits right this minute. There have been suggestions of windfall tax there as well. So that is a possibility. But what I think is going to give them quite a lot of extra cash, and I'm sure they're calculating that already, is the freezing of the thresholds, income tax thresholds, which are already putting quite a lot of people into even starting to pay the first basic rate of income tax, and also many more millions coming into the higher income tax brackets. And that should be a serious bonus for them. But of course, it means a lot less money left in people's pockets. And that is the result of higher inflation, of course. So just to explain to people, this is the idea of fiscal drag. Effectively, because the government is not increasing the threshold at which, say, the higher rate of tax, say 40p is paid, and that's true of the other of 20p as well, that people end up being dragged into those tax bands, even though in real terms their incomes have not gone up. Absolutely, and what the suggestion seems to be, because there have been so many leaks, and it's interesting what you said at the beginning, that all these leaks, and then perhaps we'll hear on the day that a number of things that will be pretty bad for people are not going to happen, but other things will happen just to soften out the blow, if you like, but ought to appear to really have listened. But the reality is that they're going to need to do perhaps more of those stealth taxes if they're not going to if they're going to stick to the manifestos and not actually increase the rates, if you like, that we're paying for, whether it is the national insurance contributions or income tax. If they extend that freeze, which is being discussed now, to later in the decade, then that will bring them more money. But that brings me, I think, to the point of how do you sell this in a way that doesn't really frighten everybody hugely, but also satisfies the markets. You can have your fiscal rules over a longer period. So you can say, we're going to go back to achieving balanced current budget, which is what we should have had this year on previous estimates. We won't do a 3-year plan, we'll do a 5-year plan, but at least the markets will be satisfied that at least we've got a plan, whereas we didn't have a plan under the Truss government.
So Vicky, I think we should perhaps explain to people that this idea about a fiscal black hole, I mean, that's something that is again repeated by the Chancellor and by other senior politicians at the moment, talking about a 50 billion black hole and so on. I mean, isn't it the case in a sense that that's a bit of a myth? Because all it basically amounts to is how much the OBR thinks the economy will grow by or not grow by, and therefore how much tax revenue will be generated. It's just a forecast, it's just a projection. It's the one the government has to work with, but that itself, that size of the black hole, can change according to the decisions the government makes. So if the OBR thinks that the economy is going to grow more slowly as a result of cuts, say, or the government deciding to shrink spending, then that itself makes the hole bigger. So it just becomes a bit of a sort of, you're chasing your own tail.
Of course, well, it's partly that, of course, and partly also what actually happens is not just growth, it's what happens to energy costs, for example. So we have this electricity price freeze, which of course could be extended if prices are quite high, or could be changed with extra help given to particular individuals that need it, and who knows what's going to happen with businesses as well. Again, this is a 6-month one now, whereas it was for individuals, for households, 2 years, and now it's been reduced. But what happens to the cost of doing that and of extending it possibly changes hugely if gas prices, electricity prices come down very significantly, and they have done recently. In fact, gas prices have come down by something like 2/3 just in the last couple of months. So the cost level of the government could change as well. So indeed, you're absolutely right. We have no idea where this black hole is, or even if there is a black hole. All that we need to do is convince the markets that the debt to GDP ratio will be coming down at some point. And after all, if we remember the figures, there was 45 billion of unfunded tax cuts that Liz Truss and her chancellor at the time announced. Now we have already reversed 35 billion of that. So we're really only talking about an extra 10 billion. But I think what the chancellor wants to have is a little bit of room for manoeuvre, so that if things prove to be a little bit better in the future and we are raising a bit more money, then he can do some tax cuts nearer the election. So I can only see this as a political gesture, while at the same time trying to satisfy the capital markets that we have a plan.
He's almost trying to use this almost as if it were the first year of Parliament, whereas in fact obviously it's midterm, and so it all becomes a bit more difficult. But very briefly, why do you think it is that the economy at the moment, our economy, the UK economy, is shrinking, whilst other countries in the G7, their GDP is going up?
Some of the countries you mentioned that are doing reasonably well, some of the southern European countries have benefited hugely from extra tourism. In some cases, the numbers have gone up to above pre-pandemic levels. So Italy, so Greece, which is growing by 5%, would you believe it? Right now, is the sort of darling of the EU. But of course, that's going to come to an end in a way, because there's this winter coming and so on. So they've had a good summer from that point of view. But also, all those countries have been much more aggressive in subsidizing energy for both households and businesses. So the increases haven't been anything like what we've seen here. And we've really got onto that very late, leaving companies and individuals and households with huge uncertainty. And that, of course, has affected consumer confidence very significantly, and business confidence. We saw the latest CBI manufacturing sentiment figures coming out just the other day, and they are appalling in terms of the sort of depression that exists. That means no investment. It means perhaps some of the hiring intentions are also going to start going down.
The thing is, Vicky, just finally, the thing is, it seems to me that the problem at the moment, we've really swung from one extreme to the other. We've gone from a government which prioritised growth almost to the extreme, to a government which is prioritising the public finances but doesn't have a growth plan. What is the government's growth plan? Right now, okay, Sunak's only been there for a couple of weeks, but we knew what Truss's growth plan was, as jaundiced as it may have been. We kind of also knew what Boris Johnson's was as well. We really have no idea. We don't even hear about it talked about, especially from the Sunak government. And that's a problem, especially in the context of, as you say, if capital budgets end up being slashed and things like transport, the things that actually generates economic growth over the long term, if those things go.
Absolutely, and that's the concern that businesses have. If you listen to anyone now, coming on the radio or on television and talking from business, they are complaining that there isn't a plan. They're complaining that they don't actually get the support. They are now increasingly complaining about Brexit. There are some leaders who say, I didn't quite vote for that type of Brexit, if you like, which has made it much more difficult to export, even to a region which is the continent, if you like, of the EU, which is slowing down itself, even though there's still some pockets of growth there for the time being. So we are in a situation where we don't really know where we're going, and the plan for growth that was there, if you like, with the previous government, but by government I mean heads of the Conservative Party and prime ministers, but two, seems to be abandoned as well, and I have no idea what's going to happen with levelling up, and we're already hearing intentions of cutting HS3, that will never happen. That's the northern link to HS2, and all the spending perhaps that was supposed to be going to improve infrastructure in the north vis-a-vis London and the southeast. So all those things will not happen if there is no money and if there are cuts. So I have no idea how we're going to achieve any growth in the future. And if you look just finally at what the Bank of England's forecasts are, they are for recession, as you remember, over the next couple of years, which is longer than the EU is forecasting at present. The EU is meant to come out of it in 2024. And then we have very anemic growth, less than 1% per annum. That does not give you any reason to want to invest in a country which is unlikely to be growing at any rate that will give you any serious returns.
Vicky Bryce there, the Chief Economic Advisor of the Centre of Economics and Business Research, former head, as I say, of the Government Economic Service. Pretty gloomy. And I do feel like I kind of depress you every Friday night going into the weekend. At least it is the weekend, I suppose. You can all drown our sorrows and that'll stimulate the economy a bit more. But perhaps you don't agree with Vicky. Perhaps it is all about austerity and we have to live within our means. What should the government do next week when basically the economic contours, the economic terms of trade for the next couple of years, certainly up until the next general election, probably in 2024, are going to be set? 0345 6060 973. Eye-watering cuts is what we're talking about. The time, it's Lewis Goodall on LBC, and the time is 6:20.
This is LBC.
Hello, I'm Jo Brand, and I'm annoyed. The unacceptable levels of homelessness this Christmas are no joke. As the cost of living soars, people are being pushed out of their homes into temporary accommodation and onto freezing streets. Crisis at Christmas offers a hot meal, healthcare, and help with a place to stay. The start of year-round specialist support. This Christmas, I'm standing with Crisis. Join me. Search Crisis at Christmas and donate £29.07 today. Thank you.
Sky Glass? It's just a smart TV, innit?
No, it's smarter.
How's it smarter?
Well, it's the only TV with Sky inside, and it helps you find whatever you want to watch in seconds. Say you fancy action.
Actually, I'm more of a romantic comedy kind of guy.
Oh, me too. Just say show me rom-coms. And there you go. There's Pretty Woman on Disney+, Eat, Pray, Love on Prime, or Shall We Dance on Sky. With Sky Glass, they're all in one place.
Oh, that's smart.
No, it's smarter. Sky Glass. Smarter than a smart TV. Requires Sky TV third-party apps. Minimum broadband speed 10 megabits per second. 18+.
To save money, I was told to cut back on takeaways. Beans on burnt toast again. I've got Labara SIM instead.
Switching to Labara could save you over £10 a month, allowing you to keep doing some of the things you love, plus a reliable network and excellent customer service. So, why not make the smart choice today? Search Labara Switch and Save.
Pizza's here!
Saving based on survey of over 15,000 new Labara customers, rated excellent on Trustpilot. Terms apply.
Do you know the average amount people lose to online shopping scams? It's £642. At Lloyds Bank, we're determined to tackle fraud together with our customers. To find out about the latest scams that are out there and for expert advice on the different ways you and your family can stay safe, search Lloyds Bank Fraud Hub. Lloyds Bank, by your side. Statistic quoted is sourced from the 2021 UK Finance Fraud Report.
This is LBC with Lewis Goodall. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
Talking about the economy, I'm going to read you quickly a couple of verdicts from some senior economists in the city. Samuel Toombs, economist at Pantheon Economics, talking about today's visibly poor economic figures, really. He said that the UK was at the back of the G7 pack again because it is beset, quote, by more intense headwinds from fiscal and monetary policy, i.e. what the Bank of England does and what the government is doing in terms of spending, and substantial long-term supply-side damage from COVID and Brexit, i.e. the economy isn't producing as much as it used to, partly because of COVID and partly because of Brexit. Something, obviously, Brexit, that other countries have not had. Anna Bota, head of economic research at the credit insurer Allianz Trade, said that UK exports are well below par, reflecting the seismic shift in the trading environment for businesses in the post-Brexit and post-COVID era, rising interest rates and the inflationary environment. And that's the thing. The government is right to some extent. It is about the global economy. There's lots of things going on that are making the economy difficult in all sorts of countries across the West. But of course, the UK has had an extra thing as well, which is around Brexit. If you put a load of trade barriers in place, it's going to affect your economy. Everyone knew that. Some people chose not to reflect it. Let's talk to Mark in Hitchin. Mark.
Yeah, hi Lewis. Well, Lewis, let's be quite honest here. We're being once again gaslit by our famous Conservative Party. Austerity that they had already applied to us years ago was not a fiscal necessity, it was a political choice. And here we are again with Conservative Chancellor saying we've got a 50 billion black hole. Well, hang on. I'm sure you've heard today that some economists have now questioned that 50 billion hole, because if you simply apply the fiscal rules that this government was using in January, we'll be having a £14 billion surplus. I'm afraid with the Conservative Party and with any form of austerity used in any country across this world, two things happen, which has been clearly measured. One, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. There is no need for austerity. There are no need for cuts. We have a Bank of England who, in a recession, are pushing up interest rates, when in a recession, governments push them down, and a government who is not prepared to spend in a recession, when in a recession, governments spend.
Mark, I mean, to be fair, I suppose on the Bank of England point, I suppose the difficulty is normally in a recession, inflation goes down, so the bank can afford to lower interest rates. The point about this, we're in a stagflationary environment, which means that they're raising interest rates to try and deal with the inflation.
Well, can I answer that question? Because there's two things that just strikes me immediately about what you just said about the Bank of England. The Bank of England, with its own forecast, is saying that next year inflation will be back down to 2 to 3%.
Yeah, but that's with the policy action it's taking. Those forecasts are predicated on them increasing rates.
No, there's another thing which I think you're forgetting. That's a mathematical certainty. Unless we're going to have another Ukraine war and another major fuel issue next year, just mathematically, inflation is based on year-to-year rises, is going to drop to that level. And we're already seeing, as I'm sure you've seen, is in America, the inflation rate is starting to fall. So the reality is, we've got a Bank of England who are pushing us into a recession, which is not necessary. The type of inflation that we currently have will not be controlled by their increasing interest rates. But what it will do is it will drive unemployment, and it will drive, unfortunately, people losing their houses. And as people have found out, it's now driving their payments on their mortgages up monthly. Why are we putting all that pain onto people when we know inflation mathematically is going to fall down anyway?
It should do, assuming that the inflation has been taken out of the system, right? But there is a possibility that if inflation is bedded in, that it just continues to increase, particularly if you have wage push inflation and so on. I don't want to get too technical with people, but that is, it can depend. You're absolutely right. If the inflation has been driven out, mathematically it'll just stop. But it's possible that inflation is bedded in, so it won't. And that's the calculation that the Bank of England's got to make. But I just want to ask you about the public finance point. On the public finance point, I mean, what do you think in terms of? I mean, at some point, do you think the government's book should balance?
No, never. Well, can I quickly explain that to you?
Please.
If you look at our national debt, I could break that down to you into 4 major sections, but let me just deal with one part of it. Of the £2.2 trillion that we currently allegedly have in debt, because it includes quantitative easing, about £200 billion of that is with the National Savings and Investment Bank. Why would you want to give all those people back their money, because you'd need to do that to balance the books, and for them to put it at a more riskier investment, because people bank with the government, because for every pound they put in, they will get back. Why would you want pension companies and investors who are about £700 billion of our national debt, £700 billion of our national debt, why would they want to put particularly pension companies put their money in riskier ventures. That's why they bank with the Bank of England. And if you look at £400 billion of our national debt, that's actually owned by foreigners. Now, why is it owned by foreigners? Because they use it to trade with us, because we trade in pounds.
The really annoying genius move was that, of course, normally when you've got high inflation, that erodes the stock of national debt. But unfortunately, a few years ago, the decision was made to make loads of new debt linked to inflation. So that's been a bit unfortunate. But Mark, thanks so much. Let's talk to Mike, from Mark to Mike in Royston in Hertfordshire. Mike.
Hello, Liz. Thank you for taking the call. The point I'd like to make is that until the public are made aware of the difference between money and currency, we're going nowhere.
Explain that for people then, Mike.
Currency is printed. That's what we have, a currency. Money is backed by a commodity, gold, silver, or whatever. The problem is that the government goes to the Bank of England and requests money. In exchange for the money, they give bonds or sureties or whatever. The Bank of England cranks up the printing presses. The money then goes back to the government and is put into circulation. I come to you and I buy your motor car for £1,000 cash that I borrowed from the bank. You take that £1,000 down to the bank or a cheque and deposit it.
Yeah, but to be fair,
fractional reserve banking then kicks in, which means the bank then has the ability to lend 9 times that £1,000 that they have on deposit.
Yeah.
It's not printed currency, it's on a computer screen.
But in what way do you think that interacts with the Autumn Statement next week? Because, I mean, we moved away.
The way that it interacts with the Autumn Statement is that we've got Hunt as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who didn't do a sterling job in health service. I can't see his credentials, financial credentials, to be Chancellor. He's heading up something which was completely destroyed by the last Chancellor that was there for a limited number of days, who also didn't seem to have much of a clue. Now, he's gone public today, or yesterday, saying that he told Trust that it was going to go wrong.
Yeah.
Well, if it was going to go wrong and he had any kind of principles, he wouldn't have done it.
Well, the thing about that, Mike, is that I believe that the sort of a day or so after he said that, he was briefing the papers sort of saying, well, we're going to go even further. So it was slightly peculiar in that respect. But Mike, thanks so much. I didn't expect to see anyone articulating a return to the gold standard on this programme, but all economic views are welcome, even if we moved away from it in the 20s. Look, coming up, the Ukrainian flag was today raised in the centre of the strategically vital city of Kherson after Russian soldiers retreated from it earlier this week. We'll get the details on how much of a turning point this could be in this war next, but first, at 6:31, let's get the headlines with Amelia Cox.
Following 8 months of occupation, Russia says it has completed its retreat of Kherson. Videos have emerged of people celebrating in the streets, and Ukrainian flags have been raised again in the city's central square. A British security guard, who prosecutors say acted out of a hatred for his own country, has admitted spying for Russia. 58-year-old David Ballantyne-Smith was working at the British Embassy in Berlin at the time. And the UK could be headed for one of the longest ever recessions after the economy shrunk by 0.2% between July and September. The Chancellor has warned there is a tough road ahead, but says his autumn budget will make a recession shallower and quicker. LBC weather, patchy light rain for southern Scotland and northern England tonight, dry elsewhere, a low of 6 degrees.
This is LBC.
Some people think the metaverse will only be virtual. But did you know that surgeons will be able to practice complex operations virtually before treating patients in real hospitals? And using virtual reality, school students will travel back in time to deepen their understanding of history firsthand. The metaverse may be virtual, but the impact will be real. Learn how Meta is helping to build the metaverse at meta.com/metaverseimpact/EN.
CFI UK is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority.
Hi, I'm Pep Guardiola, brand ambassador for CFI, a global online trading provider enabling easy and convenience access to the financial market. If you are into online trading, visit cfi.trade to find out more. Since 1998, CFI, empower yourself.
67% of retail investor accounts lose money when trading CFDs with this provider. You should decide if you can take the high risk of losing your money.
When your little angels want something super fast and noisy! When the biggest kid needs something to keep him busy. When a festive board game or two is on the cards. For gifts for all your Christmases. Say hello to VeryPay. Choose Pay Now, Pay Later, or Pay over 3 months and pay no interest. Shop toys at very.co.uk. VeryPay credit provided subject to status by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited, 18+. Representative 39.9% APR variable.
Hello there, it's the Hairy Bikers here, and we are here to help you. Yes, you listeners, to get more from your food.
We are indeed more character, more delight, and more flavour.
Yeah, and we know a proper tasty way to do it, with more, of course, the nation's favourite stock.
That's right, so whether it's a chicken, or chickpea comforting curry,
or a hearty beef or bean chilli for dinner tonight,
just be sure you give it more with more.
To verify, call 0800 731 1411.
Lewis Goodall on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
So we're talking about the economy and what the Chancellor should do or they shouldn't do, or how bad the cuts are going to be, whether they should even be done in the first place. I want to hear from you. 0345 6060 973, text 84850. But first we're just going to take in some very important foreign news, and it's about the Ukraine war. We always like to keep our eye on what's happening in Ukraine and the war which has been going on, going for most of this year. And it's a big day because Ukraine's troops appear to have swept into the southern city of Kherson, the scene of some of the worst fighting of the war so far. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying today is an historic day. We are returning to Kherson, and as of now, our defenders are on the approaches of the city, but special units are already in the city. Videos sweeping the internet showing the city centre, beeping horns, people on pavements saying glory to Ukraine. In one, Ukraine soldiers drove slowly past a crowd as people reached out to touch the soldiers through open windows. Let's hear more about this and talk to Robert Fox, who's defence editor for the London Evening Standard. Robert, what exactly has been happening, and how surprising do you think this is?
It's very surprising that they've got into Kherson and they've raised the flag and they've established their authority absolutely immediately. It was thought that once the withdrawal was announced, it was going to be very difficult to get across that flat land and then get across the river, which is a difficult river. Not to say that the Russians retreating blew up one of the principal bridges as they went. But again, great skill in PR by the military of Ukraine, as much as Zelensky himself, in saying, oh, no, we've got to be cautious, we've got to be whatever. Very interesting the way they've handled the foreign press in the region, and they got in far quicker than they predicted. And this is a tremendous symbol, as Zelensky knows, but it doesn't mean the war's over. But it is really significant, even more than actually taking Kherson itself.
And in terms of, there's been some speculation today, or people speculating that this could be some sort of trap from the Russians.
Stephen.Brown at bbc.co.uk. Stephen with a PH. With I think the right answer can go with the song, but it's the
big strike with.